We're joined now by Cosatu spokesperson Sizwe Pamla to share some of the views on this historical event. A very good evening to you, Mr. Pamla. Thank you so much for speaking to us. As we heard your former General Secretary, Jay Naidu, speak about labor unions, the conditions today, including the leadership, and reflecting on that 1973 Durban strike that saw African workers across various sectors deliberately withhold their labor in an attempt to demand higher wages and better working conditions. Are you able to just talk to us about the similarities, if any, and how great they are? Is there resonance with what we're seeing today?
Well, indeed, one of the reasons why it's so important to remember this 50th anniversary of the 1973 Durban strike is that we are facing similar situations today. These strikes happened at a time when workers in South Africa felt that they were under siege. The system that was in place was refusing to recognize them and was refusing to actually take their needs seriously. And from that 1973 strikes, those strikes laid the foundation of the rebirth of the independent trade union movement. And this culminated in the formation of Cosatu in 1985. So those strikes in 1973 actually kickstarted a movement that led to workers all around, not just in Durban, but all around the country, realizing that there was no messiah on the horizon. No one was going to come and free South Africa. That workers themselves needed to organize, to unite, and to work together to really push back against a system that was very brutal. So if you look at what has happened since 2008, the economic crisis, not just in South Africa but around the world, we had a situation where the global economy was mismanaged by people at the top, but workers are the ones who paid the biggest price. In South Africa in particular, we have had a stagnant economy for the last decade. And we continue to see workers being the ones who are being forced to make sacrifices. And which is why we have seen over the last couple of years, workers starting to unite and to work together because they realize that there is no messiah who's going to come and rescue them. We saw a decade ago, workers in the mining sector having differences in terms of how to deal with employers. A decade later, we saw unity in the mining sector. We saw AMCO and NUM working very well together to represent their members. We have seen NUMSA working with NUM. We have seen unions in the public service. So there is a realization that this is a moment where unions, leaders, and workers in general need to reflect, analyze, and understand the period we are in, and actually work together to push back against a system that is forcing them to sacrifice everything, despite the fact that they are not responsible for the crisis that we find ourselves in.
Mr. Pamla, allow me to jump in here. I'm going to draw a thread from some of what you've spoken about. I'm going to refer to the current leadership of the country, which is obviously the ANC, namely President Cyril Ramaphosa. You spoke about unity within the mining sector, but that particular strike heralded one of the most egregious events in South African history, particularly with regards to labor. President Cyril Ramaphosa was seen as front and center of that. So I'll go back to the question that I was asking, the issue that was raised by Cosatu's own leader, Lungisa Losi, as well as Jay Naidu, about the kind of leadership that exists, that is not only leading labor, but that you yourselves are in alliance with. Can you reflect on that? And how much has that changed? And that against the National Development and Management Fund, where you saw state officials, employers, and other sectors agree on what is needed and how to go about it.
Well, look, indeed, it is disappointing to see that some of the stalwarts of the trade union movement, people who actually the founder members of Cosatu itself, once they reached the corridors of power, they found we are finding ourselves as workers facing an offensive coming from them. It's something that is really a slap in the face for workers who have carried many of these leaders on their backs during their political careers. To see some of them sort of like doing the things that before they themselves were fighting against, and now they are the ones who are doing those very same things to workers. It's something that you find it difficult to swallow. But the reality is we have to deal with this. This is not the first time. If you look at liberations, not just in the country, but around the world, not just in the continent. You can go to Latin America, you go to Asia. Many of the leaders who have ended up leading countries come from the trade union movement. And some of the dictatorships, some of the corrupt regimes, and some of the most strident neoliberal proponents come from the labor movement. So it's not unique to South Africa. You can go around the world. Many former trade union leaders ended up turning around and actually deciding that, well, they embrace the free market ideas, they are neoliberal hardliners, and they believe in the free market. They have every right to do that. But it does feel like a slap in the face when you consider the fact that these workers carry them on their backs. But we don't have to throw a pity party about that. We don't have the luxury of actually sitting down and lamenting what became of those leaders. The challenge that faces the trade union movement is to do an introspection, is to reflect, to say, why is it that we produce this kind of leaders? And the kind of leadership that we currently have, is this the kind of leadership that is ready to mobilize and to push back and to deal with the challenges that currently face us? That is really the exercise that we are embarking upon as a federation.
So the role of labor movements, for instance, if we talk about the industrial labor systems of the 1970s, what has changed, the gains that you have made, is it more easier or difficult to negotiate for what you're demanding now, the ethos behind the relationship between labor and the state? I'd like to reflect, you're talking about many leaders across the world. We saw what happened in Brazil and what happened following the removal of Lula da Silva. It was labor movement that celebrated his return. And seeing where South Africa is now, given our current economic conditions, I just want to know if the labor relations with the state have changed. The systems that are in place now, are they better or worse?
Well, it's difficult to really compare today's situation with what happened in 1973. The economy that we had in 1973, not just as a country, but the global economy was totally different to what we're dealing with today. If you look at what we're dealing with today, after 1994, the democratic breakthrough opened the South African economy that was really closed for a long time. So that reopening of the economy led to some changes, significant changes. Some of those changes, we don't think the labor movement in South Africa was actually ready for. The issue of globalization, for an example. Globalization has meant that, for an example, jobs have moved to Asia and elsewhere for many reasons. So now what you have is that you have also technological advancements and technological solutions that have been introduced. So it's easy for a company in South Africa to actually outsource its services, not just to outsource its services from here to there, but also outsource its own provinces from here to another corner of the globe.
Unfortunately,
so these are the challenges that we're dealing with.
We have run out of time, but I'm sure there will be ample opportunity to go through some of these issues in more detail tomorrow on the anniversary of the 1973 industrial actions that lasted more than 3 months, as we mentioned, in Durban. So that anniversary is tomorrow. Sizwe Pamla is Cosatu's national spokesperson.